Hello guys, welcome to another sociology session. So I'll be giving you a question and you can try answering the question, and then I'll be discussing the answer also. So the structure I'll discuss the concept is actually discussed in the class. So we will look at the structure in which you will be answering this question. So take a moment and see this question. The question is about discuss Yogendra Singh's thesis on modernization of Indian tradition and evaluate its applicability in the present day context. So you need to talk about this is a structure that you need to follow. Define Indian society and modernity, and then Yogendra Singh's modernization of Indian tradition. And then you need to talk about applicability in the present day context. And then we can talk about some disagreements, which means criticisms or other perspectives. And then we will conclude the answer. So it's a 20 marker, so you have enough space to write, so you can add more in this. So now take a moment, think about it, and see how you're going to write this. Okay, so guys, when we talk about Yogendra Singh's, modernization of Indian tradition, it's a one session we have already completed. So this is going to be 10 minutes. So what I'll be doing is I'll discuss the key points, the core argument, and the main criticisms, and then I'll give you an introduction and conclusion. So that's what I'm planning for this session. Okay, so if you look at Indian society, it's a complex mosaic of traditions and modernity, deeply rooted in its hierarchical, holistic, and transcendental cultural values. So you need to talk about, how modernity and tradition is interlinked. You need to talk about the hierarchical, holistic, transcendental cultural values of Indian society. Modernity as a societal process involves significant changes in norms, values, and structures that will influence various aspects of society. So you are mentioning what is modernity. And then Yogendra Singh's thesis on the modernization of Indian tradition provides a nuanced understanding of how traditional and modern elements can coexist and interact within the Indian society. So his works bridges the theoretical, macroscopic, and microscopic perspective to analyze the dynamics of social change in India. So how he identified social changes and how the modernity and modern and traditional element interact within the Indian society, and everything is what we will be looking at. So now let's talk about Yogendra Singh's thesis on modernization of Indian tradition. What's the core argument? That's where you need to focus on, right? So you talk about the book name also, of course, the same only. So Yogendra Singh, in his book, Modernization of Indian Tradition, argued that social change in India has historically been pre-modern, where one traditional institution replaced another without structural transformation. And he highlights how dominance and power are inadequately integrated into the process of Sanskritization. Now, coming to the perspective on modernization. See, changes occur in little tradition. When we talk about that, the grassroots religious or cultural shift like the Bhakti, Jain movements like that, okay? So the changes on the little tradition, and then heterogenetic changes like external influences like Westernization, Islamization, reshape societal structures. You should be talking about this because I've given you a table for this, and I've explained what are this little tradition, the great tradition, changes, micro change, macro change, everything I've clearly defined. So I'm just telling you what you need to write here. Right? Then orthogenetic changes like the migration, population shift occur at the localized levels that will influence family dynamics, right? For example, transition from joint to nuclear family. So these dimensions you can talk about. So this means micro perspective, macro perspective, and theoretical perspective, right? So this we have covered, and then talk about historical processes like the orthogenetic change, heterogenetic change, indigenous movements like Buddhism, Jainism, and the Bhakti tradition, which has introduced reforms within Indian society. And then we also talk about the external influence, that the heterogenetic changes. So when you talk about orthogenetic, that's the indigenous movements like Buddhism, Jainism, Bhakti traditions like that. Heterogenetic changes means external influence like the primary Islamization and then the Westernization. They gradually transformed from little to great traditions. Then you need to talk about adaptation and selectivity. He also emphasized that individuals and communities selectively adapt to modernity based on their specific needs, expertise, and socio-cultural context. Now you can talk about the applicability in the present day context. So that's the persistence of traditional values, right? So Hindu society retains elements of hierarchy, karma, and transcendence as reflected in the Gita, Mahabharata, and Vedas. So when we talk about, see, the question is about its applicability in the present context. So once you complete the concept, of modernization of Indian tradition. Now we come to the application. So still retains certain elements of hierarchy, karma, transcendence as reflected in Gita, Mahabharata, etc. Right? Louis Dumont emphasis on hierarchy within the caste system aligns with Singh's observation. And then transmigration of the soul and karma. That theory continue to influence Hindu social continuity. Right? Again, we talked about selective adaptation to modernity. Upper caste Hindus and elite Muslims have embraced aspects of modernity. Large section of society remain rooted in traditional practices. For example, Jinnah's acceptance of modern practices contrasted with conservative outlook of many Muslims. That way we can mention. But that's not related to modern application. I just gave another point here. Talk about modernity and rationality. Modernity in Western societies prioritize rationality. From Weber's bureaucratic rationality to Ritzer's hyper rationality, you can understand that. But remember, modernity and rationality both are different concepts altogether. When it comes to India, rationality is often compromised due to the existence of traditional and modern values, right? So again, in fact, coexistence of both values. So rationality, when we talk about West, both are there, right? The society prioritizes rationality, right? When we talk about modernity, it is mainly rationality, the bureaucracy and everything. The rational actions, the logic and everything is what matters. But when it comes to India, since there is a coexistence of traditional values and modern values, rationality may not be like, what you see in Western society. If you see the paradoxes of modern society again, bureaucracy exists, right, without ethical accountability. And democracy strengthens, but responsible leadership is scarce, right? And then urbanization is there, but urban culture is underdeveloped. Media is hyperactive, but journalistic ethics are questioned. So these are again you can talk about as the paradoxes of modernity. What are the criticisms, the disagreements with Yogendra Singh? You can talk about JPS Oberoi. You can talk about Avijit Pathak, right? Even you can discuss Anthony Giddens, Partha Chatterjee, T.N. Madan. I've given a list of which you can take the criticisms or the disagreement. Take one or two or three from that, right? Indian modernity. In fact, if you talk about JPS Oberoi, Indian modernity parallels European modernity by rejecting religion. So you talk about Dalit movements, which resemble the Protestant movements. Then Abhijit Pathak, the modernity imposes universal patterns of growth and thought that is limiting distinct cultural expressions. Then you talk about Anthony Giddens, right? The critical perspectives of modernity. The other one that I have discussed, JPS Oberoi and Abhijit Pathak, that's a comparative framework. Now you can talk about critical perspective. Comparative means, that's what I told you, JPS Oberoi, Indian modernity is parallel to European modernity by, rejecting religion, right? So if you again see Anthony Giddens, that's a critic, right? So high modernity lead to hyper socialization. In that will influence even mundane aspects like clothing for different occasions. Example I'm talking about, the criticism, you can add more because I've given one paragraph for the same. Partha Chatterjee, again, modernity fragments national identity as seen in fragmented government and survey data, NSSO, right? T.N. Madan, modernity promote, sameness, that is stifling creativity and individuality. So guys, add 2-3 criticisms from the notes which is given to you. That's the point here. Now coming to, Yogendra Singh's thesis on modernization of Indian tradition, relevance, right? So in conclusion, what you need to do is you need to talk about relevance. So it's relevant for understanding India's paradoxical journey towards modernity. So the modern institutions like bureaucracy, democracy have grown, but ethical and cultural gaps still persist. Urbanization and media actively thrive, but responsible leadership and urban culture is still lacking. So his framework that provide valuable insight into India's selective adaptation to modernity, but new frameworks are very much necessary to address contemporary challenges like identity politics, globalization, resource constraints. So modernity in India, with its blend of limitless promises and enduring crisis, that actually demands a balanced approach to navigate its complexities while preserving its rich traditions. So his concept is very much good and helpful in understanding that transition, but still the issues need to be taken care, and we need new approaches also by taking into consideration all the limitations. So guys, that's about this session. And if you like the video, this is not about teaching what is modernization of Indian tradition, because that requires so much of effort, and that's a 1 hour session in fact that we have taken. So there I discussed with the table and the diagrams and everything, what is this micro macro heterogeneity and orthogenetic perspective and everything we discussed, right? So here I was focusing on the particular answer, the way you are going to write it. So if you like the video, share it with your friends also, and check out the channel. You'll get a lot of concepts and everything. The complete, almost all the concepts I've discussed already. So you can check out the video. If you are looking for mentorship program or the test series for sociology, or the course, you can check out the details in the description. So see you guys. Thank you so much. If you like the video, share it with your friends also.